Hey everyone, Brexit has caught the world by surprise, and in order to learn more about how Brits were thinking about this rather than how, say, for example, CNN's editors were thinking about this or some other publication's editors, it's very difficult, I digress, to not get this in a way that's unvarnished. If you're reading it, you're not experiencing it, right? I'm not in Britain. But I did run across an interesting video by a man by the name of Martin Durkin, and it was made prior to the vote by about a few months in March, and it presented a slant that turned out to be not rather conservative, but it gave me a view that distilled in a way that I got because of my background said this. You have older Britons who remember when the UK was the center of the world economically and politically at basically the turn of the 20th century up to World War II. And Britain slowly gave way during that period to the United States, and then after the war, much of its industrial base had to be rebuilt due to war damage, and that allowed Germany, Japan, and of course the unscathed United States to race ahead of England. Durkin doesn't deal with Japan in his documentary. Point being that there's a group of Britons, generally older, above 45, who want to go back to the time that Britain was the standard, the power of the world. And they say that within the European Union, their unemployment rate has been higher than it would be outside of it. And they cite the average unemployment rate for the European Union countries as a whole. And they also say that the problem is the economic planners in the European Union and the politicians are not elected, and so they being the Britons have no control over what happens within the EU. There are a number of regulations that are designed that, hey, look, the Britons feel they have no say over how to change them, and they can't push the people who created them out of office. They can't vote them out. Democracy doesn't apply. That was the explanation given to me. And I get that to a point. What made me uncomfortable was this constant conservative push, but they managed to carve out and not mention issues like, for example, immigration and race, instead opting purely for an economic argument that wouldn't piss anybody off. Okay? However, what I've noticed is that when you talk to people about what's happening, they fall into two camps. The younger people remember the UK within the European Union, where it was a kind of a state, and you could easily go from one part of Europe within the EU to the other. They don't know what the UK outside the European Union would be like. It's unknown to them, and they're afraid. However, those who remember it yearn to go back to it that time, and also talk about Britain's centuries-old habit of having a powerful desire of self-determination. It goes all the way back to feudal times. Basically, if you're going to tax us, we have to have proper representation, and so on. If we own the land, it's our land, and if you're going to take our tax, who are you to take our tax, and what are you going to do with our tax, and we have the right to know that, and so on. It's quite an interesting take. So I'm going to dive into this more because I still don't completely understand it in the detail that I want to understand it. My training is in urban economics and city and regional planning, so I am one of those economic planners, those elites that they, in Martin Durkin's video or documentary, speak so derisively of. I happen to believe that there is an advantage to economic planning that is missed in Durkin's documentary. However, I completely understand his point about the dangers of having an anti-democratic bureaucracy.